Okay, hello, Caroline and Tom. Thank you for joining me. How are you doing today?
Very well,
Good,
thanks, Mike.
delighted to be here.
It's I'm really pleased that you were able to join us, Tom. I know this is the second time you've been with us. I couldn't believe when I looked, and it's nearly 6 months since the last one, which was astonishing for me. It was back at the end of February, I think.
That's right,
So,
yeah.
um, But before we get started, Tom, for people who don't know, Tom Power is our Director of People and Culture. Tom, I wondered if you maybe, for people who didn't watch the last session, would you be able just to give a 30-second overview of what that involves?
Sure, yeah. So I'm the member of the board and the exec team that's responsible for all things relating to colleagues and culture. Got kind of board level accountability around that part of our plan for the future, NHS Grampian strategy. And I guess there's sort of three broad headings under which I guess my work focuses then. One is around health, safety, and well-being of the workforce and the systems of work. Securing a sustainable workforce. So if we've got the right numbers of people with the right skills in place now and in the future, and culture and staff experience. So how is it to work here? How do we shape and create that? And what do we learn about it? And where do we need to take action?
Okay, thank you, Tom. In terms of the questions we've had today, there's been two distinct themes, I suppose you could say, that have come out in them when I've looked over them. There's the questions that are very broad and applicable to a lot of people, but I
Sure.
guess given the nature of some of your remit, Tom, there's ones that are quite specific to individuals as well,
Yeah.
which just gave me a bit of thought about what the Q&A is for and the types of questions that we would like to address through it. Um, there's more than 20 questions in total, including some that were coming in even this morning. So we're not, with the best will in the world, going to get through them all in the time that we've got.
Mhm.
But I know Tom and Caroline, before we started, you talked about we would address those and that we would maybe get written answers to the ones that we don't get to. But before we start, there was a bit of talk about the Culture Matters survey and the work that was ongoing at the time, the last time we spoke. Um, I just wondered if that was something that we wanted to talk about for a bit of an update
Sure.
before we start today, Tom. Caroline, I know there was a few things that you wanted to ask Tom on screen about that. Um, the thing that's always important to me and how these Q&As feed into the so-called problem pipeline that's come out of that work. For the people that aren't familiar with that, do you want to just talk about what the problem pipeline is and I guess why it's so important that we address those issues? Tom, do you want to talk about that to start with?
Yeah, sure, Mike. So I guess the problem pipeline, as it's known, is a term that's used by Best Practice Australia, who are the providers of the culture survey that we've run earlier this year with a significant proportion of the workforce, and they use it to describe, I guess, things in organisations that. Um, uh, where problems or issues aren't addressed at an early stage that maybe would have taken a relatively short period of time to deal with, they tend to kind of build up in a pipeline, if you like, and they get added to as other problems and issues come up that maybe get the same treatment. And what they do over time is they create bigger problems and create bigger risks, and they become much more difficult to deal with. And they kind of come out the end of the pipeline as a really big, difficult issue that takes a huge amount of time, effort, and energy to address. So a very kind of basic example of that would be sometimes that we can kind of have what seem fairly minor issues in relation to health and safety in the workplace that kind of are known about but just don't get to the top of the priority list for action, and then they maybe get added to others over time, and then suddenly you get to a point a few years later where actually there's several of these things that have built up or combined together to create a much bigger problem, which requires a whole load of energy and effort to resolve, and can sometimes be so complex that it's very difficult to resolve without it having an adverse impact somewhere else.
And I suppose, as I mentioned there, some of the questions we get from the Q&A are very much on that theme of the problem pipeline. But I know there are a variety of other avenues, some new, some that have existed for a while, that people can use to get those questions and those solutions that maybe they're seeing but don't have the power to action themselves. Do you want to talk, Tom, briefly about what some of those avenues are? Would that be worthwhile, do you think?
Well, I think there's always the route people to raising issues through our team and line management structures in the first instance. It's always worth having a conversation in the team with your line manager about things that you notice that you think maybe need to be addressed. And ideally, if you've got ideas and suggestions, can do something about. And we hope and we expect that our line managers in the organisation will help to, I guess, help to address issues or escalate them where there isn't an easy answer, and maybe connect with others around those things. But that's not always possible. It's not always easy to do. And so there are a range of sort of sources of support and advice and guidance for people through things like the HR hub and through the confidential contacts if it's a really significant issue that somebody's got a real concern about. But what we're also doing at the moment is running a test of change of a digital app called Trickle, which gives people the opportunity to put forward, I guess, ideas, suggestions, or questions about things that they think are important and need to be attended to or looked at organisationally. And Trickle's really an opportunity for us to understand what matters the most to the community of users who engage with the platform. And what that does is it will hopefully give visibility organisationally to those issues in a sort of prioritised way, and in a way where we can provide responses to things, even if it's not possible to solve issues. It's not always possible to solve a problem, but an awareness of it and thinking about how to handle it and how to treat it is better than just it sitting there in a pipeline building up and festering, building up and becoming a much bigger issue a number of months or years down the line. So that app is in the trialing stage at the moment, but anybody who wishes to use it can do, and we could certainly post details of how to sign up to use it in the daily brief.
Yeah, I had a look at it last week actually, and there was already some of the key themes that we've had on the Q&A, Caroline, that were being raised around car parking in particular was the hot topic over the last week, I think. And I know Chantal and others from Paul Allen's team were on and engaging with people and answering some of those questions, which was great. In terms of the Culture Matters work more generally, I know there was an ambition maybe to do the survey for all staff groups this year, but I believe there might have been some reflection on whether that's the right thing to do, and I'm not sure if that's still going to happen in advance of the winter pressures that we're going to see. Am I right? And is that what I'm hearing essentially? Is that correct? I don't know if Tom or Caroline, you'd be best to
I'm
come in
happy
on
to
that.
come in. So
Okay.
happy to come in on a couple of things, Mike, on that. So if you remember, gosh, you're losing track of time, so am I, in a conversation that I had with Jackie Parle, who is one of the directors that we work with in BPA. I had made a commitment to undertake what we called phase 2 of the Culture Matters survey with the rest of the workforce beyond our facilities and estates and nursing colleagues. And that was done based on the volume of feedback and sense of concern, I think, from other groups in our workforce communities around why does my reflection and opinion not matter? Why is it just facilities and estates and nursing? So Tom, June Brown, our nurse director, and Paul Allen, our director of sustainability and infrastructure, have been working our way through that, and we have got to a position where actually our focus is going to be planning for phase 2, which will take place at the earliest opportunity in the new financial year 23-24, and that will be about capacity. So Tom and I are working through with our new Director of Finance, Alex Stevens, who joined us last week, how we are going to truly embed the right resource around focusing and prioritising culture in this organisation, because it does take a lot of support to get it off the ground and get it to where it needs to be. The stuff that Tom's talking about does not just happen by organically if we want it to work in the way that we do, which matters most. So So the resourcing, so we're working with Alex on how we can achieve that, how we can absolutely make sure that what we heard in phase one, we are acting upon. And Tom will be able to just say those to you in three really kind of clear bullets around. So, what did we hear? And then starting to test with other groups. So, is in your context, how relevant is that? Because I don't believe. I mean, it's pretty generic around the workforce concerns that we heard around the problem pipeline and enabling people to manage. As I say, Tom will say them very succinctly because he's around that work really closely. So how does that apply to, for example, our allied health professionals or our IT teams? Because I think it will apply, and that doesn't mean that we're not going to do any work with those colleagues just now. We have to work to improve how people feel at work. So for absolute clarity, focusing on making sure we get as much as we possibly can out of the intelligence from phase one, not limiting the work that we do to nursing and our facilities and estates colleagues, but applying the learning to other groups and working with them on, so what would, because remember, we can control the questions and make them most relevant. So what would matter most to colleagues that would be participating in phase two? And that's going to take a lot of work to get there. So 23, 24 around that. And I think the conversation, just listening to you and Tom around the Q&A, it's really interesting, isn't it? Everything you do has an unintended consequence. So the problem pipeline is definitely something that's come out loud and clear. So how do we address the core issues that prevent problems being addressed as close to where it has arisen as possible, instead of people struggling with that and it moving from being a problem about not having a water cooler in your area, changing from not having a water cooler in your area to nobody's listening to me and I don't have a water cooler, to nobody cares about me and I don't have a water cooler, to this is a rubbish organisation to work in and I don't have a water cooler. So how do we get to the core issues of what gets in the way of that? And I think this Q&A has gone some way to do that. The thing that's become most apparent to me is the vast majority of questions that we receive through this process are about basic T's and C's, how people feel at work, and getting the foundations right. Access to car parking, access to water, environmental temperature, how people feel and understand how to navigate the system to ask questions. And I think Tom's point about line manager is really good and really well made. And what this cannot become is a way to circumvent the due processes. But there are also other things like how do you raise, if you are a doctor in training on the ARI site, who on earth would you speak to about painting the zebra crossing at ARI? People don't understand how to navigate that system because it's too complicated. So that, I mean, that's a good thing to do around things like that. But then there's the other stuff that's much more personal and managerial, and some of that has kind of leaked into these Q&As. So a number of colleagues have said to us, Mike, through this process, what's the future of the Q&A? And so for me, it's about how do we move that forward, perhaps in person, definitely broadening out the visibility of the whole exec team, because that I'm absolutely clear that that's a really positive thing to do to support colleagues who work in an organisation to know who their senior leaders are. And so I think that's really important. And then to use all the different opportunities like Trickle, which I think is a really exciting way to do things, like Trickle, like visibility of the exec team out and about chatting to people and understanding how they experience work and how they feel, and triangulating all of that data. So this is one tiny part of it. Yeah, I think it's gone some way to doing what it set out to achieve, but we need to keep it fresh all the time and make sure that we're not just putting in a layer of stuff that doesn't address the core issue, which is why do people not feel empowered or informed enough to stop small problems becoming big problems. That's the kind of core stuff we need to get underneath that Tom and colleagues are working through, things like the culture collaborative and things like that, to understand what is at the root of that problem. Because I can come and do these and that's okay, but it's never going to get to the root of the problem. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, I think it is, and I do appreciate the honesty about, it would be very easy to not just say we're still going to try and do the Culture Matters survey organisation wide, the phase 2 work that we mentioned. It would be easy just to say that we're going to still try and do that and not, but the honesty of saying it'll be 23, 24, I think is understandable to people. It's a big piece of work and it has to be meaningful. So I do appreciate that part too. And I'm conscious of time, so we'll move on. I hope people found that discussion useful. Not everyone will, but
maybe just before we do it, but
sorry,
just make
Tom,
a pitch, because we could talk about this stuff for the whole Q&A, couldn't we? And that would be a shame because it will overshadow other things. But we've just had a culture collaborative session before this Q&A with a demo of Trickle in it and some discussion around speaking up, with some really interesting learning shared as part of that about how comfortable different grades of staff feel speaking up in organisations. And I guess hopefully people will be able to see why the Trickle app could help to overcome some of those barriers. So my suggestion would be we post the recording of that meeting, which we recorded in Teams, onto the Daily Brief, so anybody can watch it who wants to find out a little bit more. You'll probably get more from that than us talking about it for another 5 or 10 minutes now. But there's a real opportunity there, I think, for people who may not feel that they want to ask, how does the zebra crossing get painted at Forest Hill? Because I might look a bit daft asking that, to do so through that channel in a way that kind of helps them to feel comfortable to do so. I'll stop now and hand over to Victoria. Welcome to today's Culture Collaborative. I think you're going to give us a 10-minute overview of Trickle using our test environment, yeah?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tom, and thanks everybody for having me along today. Laura's going to follow up afterwards with a bit more information on how you can join the Trickle platform, just so I don't take up too much time going over that today. So first of all, just to kind of reiterate what Tom was saying, Trickle is a conversational platform. So unlike other comms platforms, we really want to empower people to speak up, but then have that next step where meaningful change can take place. So today I'll show you how each of our features feed into that kind of improvement cycle, and I'll talk a little bit on how champions play a key role in allowing that to happen. So I'll share my screen with you. It's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but you can follow up with me afterwards if you've got any questions, or reach out to Laura or Lindsay. She'll share the details. So hopefully I'll be able to share my screen and you'll see what I'm talking about. When I'm sharing, I can't really see the chat, so just bear with me. So Trickle, and this is what you'll see when you sign into the Trickle platform. You can access it on web, and you can also download the Trickle app on your mobile. That can be a work phone or a personal phone. It works on either, so it's really just up to you what you feel most comfortable having. We've got 4 main features at Trickle that feed into this improvement cycle, and that's our fist bumps, mood sense, shout abouts, and trickles. So you can see them up the top here. And I'll give you a little bit of information on how you can use each of those and why you might want to do that. So first of all, I'll show you trickles, and that's what we're kind of named after. And the idea with Trickle is that we are giving people a voice to speak up, either as yourself or anonymously. The idea being that if you do speak up, someone is going to be there to acknowledge that and come back to you with an update. And it's going to encourage collaboration, breaking down silos between teams. So here you can see one trickle that's been raised at the top. Does anyone else agree that there's not enough opportunity for career progression within your own team? So somebody's raised this Trickle and they felt that they wanted to remain anonymous, but they maybe want to reach out to a wider group for support. So you can see that they have had animal pseudonym generated for them. So if you ever see on the Trickle platform, cloaked zebra, hidden tiger, that's what's happening. Someone's just not quite ready to say who they are. So once the Trickle's been raised, anybody can comment and join in the conversation. Again, you can comment as yourself, or you can be anonymous. So we've got a bit of a mix of people who are commenting either as themselves or anonymously. And you'll see on the Trickle that we've got these flames at the side. So to give you a little bit of information on this, when a Trickle is posted, and anyone can post a Trickle, you can then assign importance to it. So I might log into the app, I'll see that someone posted a Trickle on a topic that I care about, and I might assign importance to it. So I can press the thumbs up and I can say, really keen to know more, or maybe I'm not too bothered, but I'd still like to be kept up to date. So I can assign importance to it. And I can also comment and get updates on the Trickle. So what's great about this is the more that people comment and assign importance to it, the Trickle app will rank what the hot topics are. So you'll be able to see that by people kind of having conversation, this filters through to our top 5 Trickles. And we're able to see, well, what are the 5 most kind of hot topics that people are speaking about in NHS Grampian today? So number 1, car parking. Probably not hugely surprising for people, but there will be other topics that maybe people didn't expect to have so much interest. So Trickle is really a great way to remove assumptions, because you might put a topic out there and people are actually not too bothered about it, or they're okay, and you might talk about something else and you get lots and lots of feedback. So the top 5 is a really great way for the group of champions to kind of focus and hone in on what they should address first. So the champions group, they meet every 2 weeks. They're from different specialist areas, and they'll act on Trickles, provide updates. If they don't have the answers, they'll loop in people who maybe do, and they're really just there to take things to the next step. So the top 5 is a really good way for them to manage that. I'll move on because I'm aware that we don't have a lot of time, but really with Trickles, it's just really getting the point across that you don't have to wait for someone from the leadership team to post. It's anybody can post a Trickle and anybody can get involved in commenting or helping to maybe solve a problem or share some good ideas.
Victoria, just maybe
Yes.
worth noting at that point, though, that the data from Trickle and some of the analytics that sit in the background, you probably won't be going into that today, but it will be reviewed and checked with the wider system leadership group on a periodic basis as well, so that there is that connection through to senior leadership. But we are hoping that actually this will help, sharing of ideas and suggestions at any level in the organization, not a sort of just a top, if you like, top to bottom sort of thing. And the other thing to mention is that, I don't know if you'll cover it, but my understanding is that a Trickle, because somebody has raised a Trickle, it doesn't necessarily mean that there will automatically, there's a problem there, somebody will take it away, come back and say it's fixed. Rather, it's about closing the loop and providing a response, which may include, here's the things that we have done and here's the things we're looking into. And it's about the level of satisfaction with that response that will determine whether a Trickle stays open or gets closed. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, in a perfect world, we'd raise a problem and there would be a solution, but that's not always going to be the case. But the thing that we really encourage at Trickle is, even if we don't have a solution straight away, or there's maybe a reason why we can't do something, we share that. So we're providing updates, positive or negative, but just giving a bit of background to that. And you'll find that, people just appreciate being kept in the loop. So once a champion has said, this is kind of where we are with it, this is my proposed solution or my final update, anyone who has commented or been following along on the Trickle will receive a notification, and they'll receive a prompt to vote thumbs up or thumbs down. So that's really just thumbs up, happy with that, want to close the conversation, or thumbs down, I'd actually like to keep that going. So if the thumbs up are more than or equal to the thumbs down, that will close. and that will move to be a completed Trickle. And all of the Trickle's mood senses results, they are gathered on a monthly basis and fed into an executive summary. So, nothing's being forgotten. Like you said, Tom, everything is kind of getting in front of the right people, you could say, so that people are keeping a track of what matters most. So that's trickles, and sometimes a first step to a trickle might actually be the champion group raising a mood sense. So the champions team can take a quick temperature check of how people are feeling. I'm sure you've all done lots and lots of surveys in your time, but on Trickle we have a really kind of quick way of checking in. So we're very focused on real-time sentiment. How are people feeling on this topic now? Is there any intervention we can take now? So an example of one that's going on at the moment is, would you like to see our gyms open? Mood sense are responded to just using these emoji responses. So the question or statement has to be one that you can just respond to with these faces. One that has been raised in the past, which is kind of in line with your culture collaborative, was, let me just find it, how safe do you feel speaking up? So you can see that overall sentiment was 58% negative. So when a mood sense is raised, you can run a mood sense for anything from 2 days to 2 weeks. Everyone can answer the mood sense, and it's completely anonymous. So you'll never see that Victoria Mackey said she doesn't feel safe speaking up. You'll only ever see the overall results. But the overall results are published to everyone. So it's not just a small group of people that see the results. And the hope is that once results are published, because everyone can see them, there's just a bit more momentum to take action if it's required. And if it's a positive result that you're getting, then that's a chance to celebrate that. So the mood sense has come back, we can see the result. And because of that, somebody has then raised a Trickle to dig a little bit deeper and get feedback to try and understand more. So I have seen this. Here we go. How can we improve your sense of safety about speaking up? And you can see that some people have already started to participate in this, some anonymously and some as themselves. So we just really encourage the more people who participate in a mood sense, the clearer picture we paint for how people are actually feeling. Tom, is there anything you'd like to add to that just now?
No, I think that's fine. Hopefully people can see that transition from we've wanted to find out about something and then, there's a result. So actually we've got an instant way of saying, okay, so tell us more, but with a focus really on how can we, what ideas do people have? I think we're really keen that this is an ideas platform. There's 17,000 people in this organization, huge amount of talent, huge amount of knowledge, huge amount of expertise, huge amount of creative thinking. So what is it that we haven't thought of that we could think of here, or we could be doing in this respect that would shift it from that 58% negative sentiment to 58% positive?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Other NHS boards, they'll sometimes have had somebody raise a Trickle anonymously. That will then prompt action to happen. And then once they've maybe made some changes, they'll do a follow-up mood sense to see, we've made these changes, has how you're feeling about this improved? So it's a really great way to measure improvements.
And I guess the only other caveat I'd put around this, Victoria, at the moment, of course, is that we're in a test stage where the audience participation rate is, the participation levels are still quite low. So whether or not it's a representative sample is debatable, but nonetheless, for those participating, 58% felt that. So it wasn't something I felt could just sit there and not be responded to. And that, I guess, is the benefit of having this sort of visibility in this instant, really instantaneous feedback. But the more people who use it, the more representative it'll be, and the clearer idea we'll have about what matters most to people.
Thank you. So I'm going to really quickly touch on the other two features I spoke about at the top here. They are shout-outs and fist bumps. Shout-outs are a really useful way of sharing information with a large audience. So with shout-outs, trickles, and mood sense, you can tailor your audience. So that might be your department, your location, or the whole organisation. Sometimes somebody might post a shout-out just to say, the car park at such and such location is getting work done on Tuesday, just a heads up. Other times, groups may have worked on new resources and you can signpost people to that. You can also do a shout out to say, we're having a culture collaborative meeting. we really would love to see more people there. So there's lots of different ways you can use shout about. Anyone can use them. And then finally, fist bumps are one-to-one ways to give praise. So they're completely private. You won't ever see Victoria gave Laura a fist bump on the platform. The only person who would see that would be Laura. So it's a really nice, authentic way to give praise. Sometimes you might not have seen someone, but you can quickly on your phone send a message and that other person will receive a fist bump. And it will pop up on their phone or their computer. And it's just a really great way to kind of continue building a culture of appreciation. So that's the really quick tour of the main features, and hopefully you can see how they flow together, sharing ideas, sharing maybe concerns, but then, collaborating to take next steps and ensure that people are being heard and action is taking place.
Thanks very much,